Picke op plaats.
Hereby, I open the academic ceremony in which Elisabeth Brevete will defend her academic thesis, Mental Effects and Potential Therapeutic Use of Kratom mitragynine. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Thank you. Dear Prorector, the members of the Defense Committee, their supervisors, their family, friends, and colleagues here at home, thanks for joining me for the defense of my thesis that is centered on the mental effects and potential therapeutic use of kratom and mitragynine. First of all, I start with a brief introduction describing kratom. Kratom is the common name used to identify an herbal plant, commonly known as Mitragyna speciosa, which grows native in Southeast Asia, especially in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, but also in other countries such as Africa and Papua New Guinea, where it's been used for centuries for traditional medical use. In fact, in these countries, kratom has been used for the self-treatment without medical supervision in several conditions, including pain or common health problems such as diarrhea, diabetes, infections, but also fever, cough, hypertension, or to combat fatigue when working under the sun, to self-treat opioid and alcohol withdrawal, and to detoxify from substances like amphetamines and cannabis. Over the last decades, kratom has also become popular in Western countries, especially in the United States and in Europe, where it's sold in several forms, such as raw leaves, capsules, tablets, and powder, and it's used for both recreational and medical purposes. In fact, several users claim the benefits of kratom for the self-treatment of some medical settings of pain, but also of some psychiatric symptoms such as anxiety, depressive symptoms, or for substance use disorders, including opioid use disorders, and for performance enhancement to boost focus and energy. From a psychopharmacological perspective, we know that kratom exerts stimulant effects for doses smaller than 5 grams and sedative effects like opioids for doses higher than 5 grams. Its main psychoactive compounds are mitragynine and its metabolite 7-hydroxymitragynase, which is considered to mediate somehow its analgesic effects. Mitragynine acts on several receptors in the brain, including mu, delta, and kappa opioid receptors, but also others, such as serotonin, dopamine, adenosine-adrenergic receptors, which are involved in its pharmacological effects that were also somehow investigated in our research work. Given this background, the main objective of my dissertation was to answer the following questions. First, what is known about the safety concerns, motivations, and behavioral effects of kratom and mitragynine use? Second, do we have evidence on the balance between their therapeutic benefits and additive potential? For doing this, we conducted some studies with different methodologies, including an online research on the dark web, an online study with a survey design, a systematic literature review related to some preclinical data, an experimental study with healthy human volunteers. First of all, we realized a research on the dark web to understand if kratom products are available on high-risky dark web marketplaces. But what is the dark web? The term dark web refers to all pages on the internet that are not indexed by standard search systems such as Google, and where most of the activities of crime groups are realized. The dark web allows the anonymous access to drug marketplaces where novel psychoactive substances, including novel synthetic opioids or others, are sold. Vendors and suppliers operate there with an e-commerce such as eBay style, and they use encrypted messages to communicate, while cryptocurrencies such as Monero or Bitcoins are used as payment strategies to avoid legislative controls. We use a platform provided by a private agency specialized in information security service, and we analyzed a total of 180 dark web marketplaces. As you can see in this figure, we found a total 231 Kratom listings, of which 40 were actively sold across 5 crypto markets by 13 vendors, and they were available in form of powder, pills, capsules. There were misleading advertised and safe substitutes for medicinal products. So, based on this, we concluded that it's necessary to develop some countermeasures to inform Kratom consumers and buyers about the potential harms related to Kratom consumption. We also need to develop some strategies to involve enforcement agencies for curbing the sale of adulterated Kratom products on crypto markets, and we should educate the consumers to recognize the risk of exposure to other goods given the potential side effects. In line with this, we conducted a survey to understand use patterns, adverse events, motivations, and subjective experience linked to the use of classic, novel, and herbal opioids. We collected a total of 310 responses, and as you can see in this figure related to individual drugs, we found a total of 27 different compounds reported by users, and they belong to these main classes: classic opioids, herbal opioids, fentanyl analogs, and novel synthetic opioids. Kratom was the most used among herbal opioids. In terms of motivations, users' reports revealed that both Kratom and classic opioids were used for recreational and medical purposes, including pain or also improving mood, improving concentration, and Kratom was also used as a legal alternative to classic opioids. Similarities were reported between Kratom and classic opioids also in terms of addictive potential, and this latter point is relevant as Kratom use is not without risks. In fact, as you can see in this figure, we found several adverse events, including both physical side effects on the left of the panel and psychological side effects on the right. Kratom and classic opioids show similarities in terms of gastrointestinal and cardiovascular issues, and also psychological side effects, mainly low mood and anxiety. So our findings highlight the need to monitor the user distribution, given the potential psychiatric and medical risks, and also the need to better understand if Kratom use is linked to some benefits or not. Thus, we conducted a systematic literature review driven by this question: does Kratom have potential medical benefits and safety issues in humans? We found, first, 57 preclinical studies, among which 23 studies suggested the potential of Kratom or its alkaloids in treating acute and chronic pain. 14 suggested the potential of Kratom in morphine ethanol withdrawal dependence, and 26 suggested the potential in other conditions given the antidepressant, antipsychotic activities, or also the activity in inflammation. Our research generated also some clinical studies, a total of 18 studies, among which only 2 were interventional studies suggested the potential of Kratom in reducing pain sensitivity in humans. The others were mainly observational studies conducted among Kratom chronic users, with 9 of them showing a link between Kratom use and some health issues such as learning impairment, dependence withdrawal, and high cholesterol level, while 7 showing no link, for example, with Kratom use and some biochemical parameters. We concluded that despite the preclinical evidence on potential therapeutic use of Kratom is encouraging, more trials are needed to corroborate such findings. Thus, we conducted an experimental study to understand the safety profile, the cognitive effects, and the effects of pain on mitragynine after acute administration. We used a single blind with a subject study divided in 2 parts. In the first part, 8 human volunteers received placebo and 3 doses of mitragynine, 5, 10, and 20 milligrams, on different test days and following a sequential escalating dosing scheme. The second group of 7 subjects received placebo and 40 milligrams of mitragynine. For each test day, after the administration of mitragynine or placebo per oral intake, the subjects were monitored for 7 hours at regular intervals in terms of vital signs, such as blood pressure, respiratory rate, heart rate, subjective effects, cognitive function, and pain tolerance. Oh, sorry. What did we find? Overall, mitragynine did not affect most of the outcome measures at any dose, neither vital signs. Here we have figures related to the vital signs, and we found only a slight decrease in blood pressure, respiratory rate, but the values were within the normal ranges, so they were not considered clinically relevant. In terms of adverse events, we found that only transient and mild side effects with the highest dose of mitragynine. As you can see in this table, we found itchy burning sensation when urinating, fatigue, headache, drowsiness, and sleepiness. So we concluded that doses of mitragynine up to 40 milligrams were well tolerated in these groups. In terms of effects on cognition, we found stimulant effects of mitragynine for low doses. Here we have the results related to the psychomotor vigilance task, a sustained attention task which measures the reaction times in response to a visual stimulus, and we found that the low doses of mitragynine increased the accuracy in this task, suggesting that mitragynine might exert psychostimulation, which is also one of the main reasons for using kratom according to users' reports. At the same time, we found also some impairment effects at high doses. Here we have 2 figures related to the results of 2 self-administered questionnaires. In these questionnaires, we found that the highest doses of mitragynine, 40 milligrams, increased the self-ratings of obsessive-compulsive dementia and of amnesia, respectively in the figure above and the figure below. So we concluded that high doses of mitragynine might cause some symptoms, mild symptoms of psychological distress, and might also have some sedative effects on cognition. To conclude, and based on our findings, we can say that in terms of safety, motivations, and behavioral effects, low doses of mitragynine are safe for consumption in single administration. Kratom is mainly used for pain and addiction outside medical settings. Low doses of mitragynine exert stimulating effects at cognitive level, while high doses might have some impairing effects. In terms of therapeutic and additive balance, we don't know if kratom might cause a second opioid epidemic, so we don't know if you are replacing opioids with something worse or something better, as kratom has also some additive potential. Thus, there is a need for further tolerability and safety studies and randomized controlled trials, also with higher repeated doses of mitragynine, at least more than 50 milligrams, and diverse ethnic groups or kratom-naive individuals, as most of studies have been conducted among kratom chronic users. These studies might contribute to enrich the debate related to the balance between the therapeutic potential of kratom and mitragynine and their physical and mental issues. With this image, I'm concluding my presentation. Thanks for participants, to my supervisors, and I give the word back to the Rector. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. The opposition will be opened by Professor Dr. Arjan Blokland, Professor in Comparative Neuroscience at the Faculty of Psychology and Neuroscience, Maastricht University.
Thank you very much. Dear candidates, first of all, my congratulations with your really nice thesis on an interesting topic, and of course your supervisory team for supervising you during this whole period. I think it was quite a long traveling from Maastricht to Rome, and somewhere in between you were writing the thesis, so I compliment for all the work you did and to finish it after all, after such a long time of hard work, next to the other things you had to do in Rome. Yeah. Anyways, let's go to the thesis. So this is, of course, very interesting, that and a lot of people are looking for these kind of interesting compounds that might have some beneficial effect for their health. And of course, the world is really small, and when you hear something from Asia, that's something like kratom is very helpful for the Asian people. But of course, this is not just popping up like something that is helpful. It has some kind of culture in there, and is especially used by these people in Asia. And now people in the Western world, we should also use it. But of course, it has a very different tradition and culture for the people that use it in Asia. So what do you think is the relevance of the culture and the habits and the traditions of using this compound as compared to just our rationalistic Western people that want to use a drug that might be helpful? And then if you just think it, it will also help based on these questionnaires they all fill out.
I'll esteemed opponent, thank you for your comments, words, and for your question. I think this is a relevant point today, as the culture is relevant for all plants, not only for kratom, and also for other plants. In this case, it's really relevant as kratom means many things in the West, while in the Asia, in the Eastern, it means only the leaves, or maybe the tea. If we think of Southeast Asia, people drink kratom for self-treating their problems and chew the leaves for increasing energy. But the point is that there we have the natural plant. While in the West, we have other products, mainly with different concentration, maybe with contaminants, different purity. Another point is recently, we don't have only products with mitragynine, that is the main alkaloid, but also with 7-hydroxymitragynine, with a concentration at least 98%, that's dangerous because it's the main metabolite. So maybe the problem of the West is that they don't have the same background. They think it could be a panacea, as it happens for other substances, for all remedies. And another point is that often in the West, kratom is used from people that don't have access to the medical system. They use kratom when they are really in pain or have psychiatric issues and they don't find a solution. The background is completely different in the East. People cannot use drugs. There are also many people with substance use disorders who use kratom, but that use is just similar to that in people with substance use disorder in the West. This could be a similarities linked to the diffusion information by the web. But the beginning, at least 200 years ago, kratom was just a plant. Now I think it's also becoming a drug. For some aspect, it's a plant-based NPS. For others, could be a remedy. The point is that we don't have a full understanding now.
Okay, but you think that it is probably different for a Western-oriented person than from an Asian person?
And also because of the culture.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to another question. So I saw on the slide, I just saw that with these side effects, it's always NS1 who has all the side effects. It's only one person.
I don't remember.
It was on one of the slides that the NS1 for all these side effects from chapter 6.
I want to see the picture. Which one?
Yeah, back. It was this table with all the effects of 10, 20, and 40 milligram of mitragynine.
Ah, the experimental study.
Yeah, here. So I was a little bit surprised by NS1 in the complete
Only one subject.
column. So, and because it's a within suffix design, was it always the same person?
In this moment, I don't have this information. I'm not sure it was the same.
Okay, because that would be some kind of outlier then, when it's always the same person who complains about headaches all the time. But you're not sure if it's the same person that always reported something.
No.
No, okay, but I was curious to see because it was.
No, I don't remember this point,
yeah.
but good. This is interesting point that you check.
Next, of course, when you look at these data, I mean, it's not so much of an effect there. You just showed the effect on amnesia, but when I look at the picture on page 184, it's the C80SS, so it's the Clinical Administered Dissociative State Scale, and one subscale is the amnesia scale. But of course, I'm very interested in amnesia and memory, but I don't know the scale. So what are they actually measuring? How do they decide whether somebody has a form of amnesia? How do you decide that?
It measures the personalization, the realization, and this alteration of perhaps encoding memory. In this case, we have suggested.
But I mean, how do you assess it? Is it like you give them a list of words and then ask them?
It's a questionnaire. It's a questionnaire.
Yeah, but what do you ask then? What do you ask from these people?
How you feel after the drug, the administration of the drug, and if you feel in this moment the perception of the situation, some items.
Yeah, because for me, amnesia means that, for example, you can't remember things well, or you lost memories or something. So, but
it just a subscale. This is related to the dissociative state, the scale, not because we assess the memory, with the cognitive task. We use those tasks for the cognitive function. This was mainly related to the effects of the drug on the mood state, of the perception, and how they feel.
So that's more subjective then,
yeah, exactly.
rather than objective.
Not objective, yeah.
Yeah. So how can you then tell?
It's just self-ratings.
Sorry?
It's just related to the self-ratings of the patient. We didn't use, while for as objective, we use the memory task.
Yeah, for me it's difficult to understand that you say that you think that you have amnesia, because how would you know if you don't know, if you can't remember?
So we should make more tests, objective tests to confirm this.
Yeah. But I have one other question on for chapter 6 on page 189. And there on the second paragraph, you say, except for some stimulant effects on the higher dose. And then later on, you mentioned something like more low actions, so more like a sedative effect. So actually, it has two sides.
Two type of effects.
How should I understand that?
We suggest this because we use a scale to assess the impulsivity, and we found an increase of the level. We found an increase. It means that maybe the flow of the thinking is fast. And we realize a correlation with some data in the literature, recent literature, related to a double effects at high doses. It's just a suggestion. We don't have data. I'm not sure about this, but it could be related to this point, as kratom has a double action also in the literature.
Yeah. Okay. I see that I have to stop my series of questions. I give the word back to the director. Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Professor Dr. Fabrizio Schivano. He is a professor of clinical pharmacology at the University of Hertfordshire.
Dear candidate, thank you for your thesis. I have read with interest your thesis. The focus of your dissertation, the focus of your studies, it is relevant, consistent, appropriate. I run a clinic in the southeastern part of England, not far away from the Gatwick Airport in London. And I really see people coming to my clinic who are buying kratom from the web. So it is a clinical reality. Second, one of the focus of your dissertation here was the possible misuse of kratom mitragynine as a cognitive enhancer. Once again, the use of smart drugs in the students in the UK and quite a number of other countries, it is rampant. Number 3, you are right. Our independent from your research has clearly identified that some NPS, including kratom, are being misused, self-administered by clients, people, subjects, as a sort of a self-treatment for a range of symptoms. Given this introduction, I have a couple of questions just to be able to better understand. Number 1, you do suggest that it is possible that in the future, the use of kratom will possibly be considered in the psychiatric practice. We are not talking about the misuse, psychiatric practice. Can you better expand on these issues, which are, in your opinion, I know that more studies are, of course, they are needed, there's no debate about that, but which are the issues that, in your opinion, they need to be covered, they may be covered by the possible putative future prescription of kratom mitragynine?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your questions and also for your words. This point is relevant today as there are some preclinical evidence of kratom about its potential in psychiatric practice, but as psychiatrist, it could be dangerous. So I should take together two visions. One vision as a researcher, that when I started to study kratom, and I found preclinical data on its antipsychotic effects, antidepressant, and its psychotic potential, I really believe, wow, it could help in everything. Also because as psychiatrists, sometimes we find patients that don't accept the medicines, and plant-based medicines could be an option in that case, because if we say, you can take this is natural, they can accept. Maybe. So it was really interesting in that time. But the point is that many kratom users are also psychiatric patients, if we have a look at the surveys. They use antidepressants, they use drugs, they use substance use of different kinds, mainly amphetamines. There are also cases of coaddition between kratom and psychostimulants. So the point is, maybe it could be useful, but we should first understand all drug interactions, given that mitragynine is an inhibitor of CYP3A4 to D6, and they also, also our medicine, our psychiatric drugs interact with this. So the future, I think, is really, really far to use kratom in psychiatric disorders.
Okay. Thank you, Candida. I have another question. In chapter 3, you seem to suggest a possible use of kratom mitragynine in treating the craving for alcohol and other drugs. On the other hand, you have clearly explained in your presentation of your thesis that kratom mitragynine, it is an opioid mu, delta, and kappa opioid agonist. In the clinic, we do use opioids for alcohol, and but they are opioid antagonists, nalmefene and naltrexone. So I was curious about this issue. Why do you think that opioid agonists, as opposed to opioid antagonists, may have a use in treating alcohol and drug withdrawal and craving? Thank you for your answer.
The point is the bias agonism that they have in terms of adverse effects that can be reduced, and also the mitragynine don't act on all these receptors. The activity in withdrawal is not related to all these receptors, but mainly to delta receptors as competitive antagonists. So it could create a mechanism so the people could avoid to use the other drugs. But we have only preliminary evidence in vitro model in some cases, which are related to the signaling pathway involving CAMP, that that is different, and mitragynine goes to inhibit this signaling, or limited preclinical evidence we have for this. And it seems also that mitragynine has less abuse potential in preclinical model. That's why it could be used for this. Or in another study, seems to have the similar effects to both buprenorphine and naloxone. I hope this is a right answer.
Okay, so it is a complex scenario. The pharmacodynamics may need to be better understood. Okay.
Acts on more.
Last question. Yeah, last question. We have discussed today, you have presented that low dosages, e.g. 5 milligram of mitragynine may actually increase the level of attention and arousal, somehow consistent with the idea of misusers of kratom and mitragynine being a cognitive enhancer. I was very curious about, you were quite adamant that this was not happening whenever you were administering 40 milligrams. So 5 milligram, yes, 40 milligram, forget. Correct? Good. Now, I was asking myself about the possible pharmacodynamics, mechanism of action. Why is that? One answer that I was giving to myself that I wanted to discuss with you, is it possible? Because at the end of the day, it is still an opioid, mitragynine and kratom, it is an opioid. In the clinic, I see people intoxicated with opioids whenever they are treating kratom, and they need to be prescribed with methadone, okay? So the question is it possible that, for example, with 5 milligrams, they do have an alleviation of anxiety? All of us, whenever we are exposed to an exam, we have something which is called performance anxiety, okay? So if we take a sort of an anxiolytic, some performances are going to improve. So is it a good explanation of why 5 milligram working, 40 milligram not at all? Thank you for your answer.
I think there are two aspects. We should consider first a placebo aspect, because kratom users believe that kratom is useful for getting more energy, and many studies, in many surveys, they say that do not use kratom for getting high. And the other aspect is the act on serotonin receptors and adrenergic receptors. In this case, the effect on the opioid receptor could be less. That's why the sedative effects appears at higher doses. This could be an option.
So in other words, whenever the dosage is smaller, the recruited receptors is going to be, the range of recruited receptor is going to be smaller as well. So in other words, we may conclude that the pharmacodynamics of 5 milligram may be very different from the 40 milligram. We have two different products. It is not unheard in medicine. It may happen.
Could be. This could be. It's not clear yet.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you, dear candidate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the opposition will be continued by Dr. Laura Hondebrink. She is an assistant professor at UMC Utrecht. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I would like to start with congratulating you with your thesis and also your supervisory team with this nice accomplishment. It was really interesting to read your thesis. It was fun reading it, and you were really creative in your methods that you used, and you used a lot of different ones. As you may know, I work at the Poison Center, so I'm mainly interested in the human data that you describe, and especially in chapter 6, where you did the human volunteer study. So I found it really interesting that you were able to do that with healthy volunteers that never used kratom before, which is quite different from all the Asian studies with volunteers, I think. And I wondered, how did the Medical Ethical Review Committee respond to your application on this? And were there any struggles? Do you have any tips for people also wanting to implement a phase 1 study?
I can say that the reviewing was hard. It happened during the COVID-19. The protocol was changed many times. But the point was also that the dose is not so high if we consider a previous the only previous study 5 years ago. The doses used in that case was up to 23 milligrams. It's always a phase 1 study that needs time to be approved. But this was an exploratory study, and the group had many experience about this. And also, if we think today, the doses is higher than 50 milligrams in terms of safety issues. If you consider some.
Yeah, I would like to continue on the dose indeed, because the highest dose you tested was 40 milligrams, and a regular dose of kratom is 5 grams, I think. So, how is
Kratom.
so you tested mitragynine.
Mitragynine.
Yeah, so how is that related to 5 grams of kratom? How much is mitragynine is normally in there?
You mean the equivalent?
Yeah.
The equivalent is 4 grams of kratom is around 53 milligrams, but this date comes from a recent study.
Okay.
At that time, we consider both the chronic use, but in the traditional context, we had only estimation of the content of mitragynine.
Yeah.
It could be higher, while the mitragynine dose is similar to the products that were used at that time in the West. Mm-hmm. And the amount is often small. Today, we have products with higher doses, also enhance mitragynine with more than 70% of mitragynine.
Yeah.
I think the kratom research is evolving, and evolving in the last years, also about this point.
So sometimes we receive inquiries about poisonings, and sometimes they even report 100 grams of kratom. So how would you assess the risk in such a poisoning?
In terms of in our study?
No, not in your study, because that was much lower. But if you would go higher, how would you assess the risks in that?
As the literature is now, I would say that in the eastern countries, kratom is safe up to 400 milligrams of mitragynine. 400 milligrams. And you don't have any relevant issues until this dose. They use it 3 times a day, but they drink the natural plant. Mm-hmm. For the Western countries, I'm not sure about the dose.
Okay, yeah, it's difficult to
no,
estimate.
Because there are also contaminants and adulterants, and you will never know the real content of the products.
Yeah, that's an interesting bridge to my next question, I think.
But in some case, in the post-mortem, they have found level between 4 nanogram per milliliter, up to 11,000.
Yeah, it's highly variable then, yeah. Okay, thank you. I would like to continue to my next question, and it's related to one of the propositions that you read. So I'd like to ask your paranymph if she can read out proposition number 7.
Okay. Nutraceuticals and herbal medicines should be the future for treating physician symptoms.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really intrigued by your statement on this, and also related to your thesis. It's not really coming from the work that you have done, I think. It's maybe even contradicting this. So could you elaborate on this statement?
I'm a psychiatrist. So this comes mainly from my clinical activity in outpatient services. Here I wrote psychiatric symptoms, non-psychiatric diagnosis. Sometimes people who come to the hospital are a person with some psychological suffering. And in those cases, anxiety is just a symptoms of another problem, and they will need psychotherapy. And in those cases, we don't need to use many drugs or many medicines. We have also the problem of the stigma. They don't accept, as I was saying before, psychotropic medicines. So we can use, in this case, some herbal plant. And in this case, I can say they accept. in the nutraceuticals, I mean. But, of course, they are not good for people with psychotic symptoms or with schizophrenia. Even, I don't know if the real diagnosis of schizophrenia is still valid today. But I would say for people who need psychotherapy, and that in this case, anxiety and mild depression is just a part of their suffering, we could use this. And we could create a relationship, I mean a therapeutic relationship.
Very interesting. I would like to discuss with you further, but I think the time is limited. So thank you for this nice discussion, and I hand the floor back to the chair.
Thank you very much. The opposition will be continued by Professor Giovanni Martinotti. He's a professor of psychiatry at the University of D'Annunzio.
Good afternoon to the audience, candidate, and to the Commission, and congratulations for this presentation that has been very clear, and also for the thesis that you wrote that is very detailed. My question is about the interaction between kratom and the possibility to develop psychotic symptoms. Psychosis, of course, is a possibility after the use of substances. And to this respect, in chapter 3, you say something about the role of kratom. If you go in details about this, trying to show us the specific risk that a subject using kratom has when he is using this compound.
Opponent, thank you for your words and for your question. To answer this question, I should consider the literature about this. In a recent review, we have found the evidence related to the psychosis, diagnosis of psychosis among subjects who use kratom, and there are 10 case reports about this. They were already psychiatric patients. They were patients, some with bipolar disorder diagnosis, and some with schizoaffective disorder diagnosis. And in this case, we have a new decompensation. In another case, also an episode with paranoia and other delusions. So we could say that kratom could increase the risk of decompensation in psychiatric patients if we consider this data. And also there is the problem of interactions between our drug, the antipsychotics, with antidepressant or mood stabilizer if we consider the cytochromes. And in this case, we could have both medical and psychiatric issues. But the other point is that in chronic kratom users, a study has shown that there is no link between the use of kratom and development of psychosis. So I think it's early to understand if kratom is directly linked to psychosis, but a point could be, as some authors suggested, like you, that kratom could be involved in the substance-related exogenous psychosis, not as main drug, but also as other NPS. I'm not sure because the symptoms reported in the literature are not completely related to all criteria that you suggested for these syndromes, but it could be. And that's why we should monitor the use of kratom. In Italy, we don't have this problem, but I think also clinicians and psychiatrists should be educated about this because most of our colleagues don't know it, and don't know NPS in most of cases.
Thank you very much. And my second question is a very general question. So, I mean, now at the moment you are an expert in kratom and you know all the literature and so on. But what do you think about the possibility that kratom would become a drug legally available all over the world? What would happen if kratom would be legal in most of the countries? What is your feeling about this in the perspective?
I'm afraid that we should do as the government made in US. I'm afraid it could be we could have another opioid epidemic because We have cases of kratom use disorders. It depends on the use, on the frequency. But there are many people who are suffering because of pain, and they could use kratom for this, given also that they find information about kratom use on social media, and social media now are better than the doctor. Most of people choose their medicine, their treatment based on this system. In this case, they start to use kratom worldwide. We could have the same problem as cannabis in some places. But the point is always the dose make the poison. That's why we should maybe better study the safety issues. I believe that kratom has some therapeutic potential in terms of pain. But the risk, as also with the misuse of other substances and opioids, are always present. No, the really point is the dose makes the poison.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy with the answer. That's it from my side.
Thank you very much. And we continue the opposition with Dr. Lorenzo Taristani, Associate Professor in Psychiatry at La Sapienza University.
Yes, good morning, ladies, gentlemen, good morning, everybody. And first of all, I would like to express my congratulations to Dr. Sprevede for this hard work during her PhD thesis and for the nice presentation of today and for this thesis, which is very interesting and I really enjoyed in reading. Okay, I have a couple of questions. The first question, it's maybe partially overlapping with other issues already discussed, but it was about to better explain to me a link between your results and the potential psychiatric application. As a clinician, I'm very interested. Could you tell me better which kind of disorders? Because the depression and anxiety could be the most indicated maybe, but maybe not only. And I'm also very curious about the dose problem, which is common in other plants, in some medication. The pharmacodynamics can change between 5 and 40 milligrams, that's of course. If you could, easily speak without the evidence, how can you imagine a possible medication with kratom?
My opponent, thank you for your words, for your question. We should think first to the results of the experimental study. If we consider the low doses, that is not only 5 but also 10 milligrams, we found that the participants reported to increase in self-reading also of arousal, and obviously the details related to the psychostimulation. So, and we have some anecdotal reports about the use of kratom for the self-treatment of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, without evidence, of course, just for the self-treatment. And we could think that this experimental data would help to explain maybe why such users use kratom for this. It can happen through the serotonergic, dopaminergic system, and another point could be mediated by the CB1 receptors, because in animal models it has been shown that an antagonist of CB1 receptors could stop the upregulation of these receptors, and in this way, mitragynine can reverse the cognitive impairment. This is preclinical, a recent preclinical study. But if we can use it in these patients, we are still far, but could be an application. But the receptors used for psychostimulation could be the same on which mitragynine acts for treating depression. And we have also to consider perhaps the evidence on acetylcholine esterase, as we have found some data on this where mitragynine inhibits this activity. But Beside mitragynine, there are also the other alkaloids, paclitaxel and pinanthine, that could mediate psychostimulation and activity in depression. We did investigate such alkaloids, but they are getting interesting in the last years, and because of their activity, maybe synergies with mitragynine. And another point could be the activity in Alzheimer's disease, given the activity on the acetylcholinesterase. But it could be related both to mitragynine and also to phenolic content or flavonoids and other aspects in kratom. Kratom means many things. So if we speak about mitragynine, we should consider its effects and has some potential. But we have also to consider the other alkaloids that are in the plants. And maybe if we find the right dose to avoid safety issues, but at least we should realize another phase 1 trial with multiple doses to understand which is the right dose, we could also have hope for another medicine. But we have to consider together risks and benefits. It happens also with benzodiazepines, I would say, because they create dependence, but they are really useful. Something like that.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I'm even more confused now with ADHD and Alzheimer's. I'm getting confused. Yes, but it's very interesting. Okay, my second question was about your chapter 4, on the surface net, which is YouTube, and it was very interesting. And I was surprised because you found much more videos and results on the therapeutic applications as compared to the recreational positive effects. But if you look at your table, it's interesting that they partially overlap, because if I find help for depression or anxiety, and then I find a recreational energy boost or mood elevation or relaxation, they partially overlap. And I found very interesting the comment of Professor Schifani about a possible indirect effect of the opioid effect on anxiety, leading to a better cognitive performance in your study on non-clinical subjects. But so, in your opinion, you saw those videos, and people was also referring about other people, so they put together some non-scientific information. And I wanted to just another comment from you that you saw those videos. It's very interesting.
The data we collect in the tables are not related to self-experience, but we had 23 individuals. In some cases, they reported their self-experience. Okay. In other cases, there were also doctors and users. They were expressing their opinions about kratom. And in this way, we have 58% of videos with a positive message. At the same time, in the same videos, in some cases, we have also 20% of negative message, and others had a neutral view. The videos were used to realize a milestone to understand what from the real world we can learn. Because the social media are also the way, the YouTube is the platform that people use to decide their dose and which drug use, not only for kratom. That's why we have an overlap. But in most of cases, they reported both the benefits and also the safety issues. Why? In some cases were related to real experience, and in other cases they were related only to what they heard from other people. Yeah.
And if you, yes, sorry, Dr. Previte, it looks like, as you were saying, benzodiazepines. We could imagine also with analgesics, opioids, you could find maybe similar figures. Yeah, okay. I don't know the time, but I'm really satisfied. And again, congratulations for your work and for your answers to my questions.
Thank you. Since we have a tiny little time left over, I suggest we start another round, starting with Professor Blokland.
Yes, thank you very much. So I was looking at your chapter 2 and chapter 3, and they seem to be very similar, actually. And where you use a Prisma schedule for chapter 1, you don't use it for chapter 2, you don't use it for chapter 3. So how did you go about the scrutiny of selecting the correct papers for chapter 3? Yeah, let's start with that one.
Okay, thank you. The point is that chapter 3 is an update of chapter 2. And it was related to a journal for experts. And the method was the narrative review, including the recent evidence in the last 5 years. As we have realized a previous literature review with systematic method and Prisma, and we updated the information with the recent data between 2018 and 2022. Maybe if we do today, we have other evidence. And the point was to understand, as the Creighton research is really evolving constantly, if there were other data. So we collected these, and we added this to the previous data. And we found more data, I would say, in clinical, I would say more clinical studies compared to the previous one. Methodologically, I would say the Prisma is more right. By the way, in this way, we have a complete overview that was good to have a complete background about Creighton. Also to realize our experimental study.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think I got the answer to my question. So, did you really check for the paper whether the quality was good of this paper that you included in chapter 3?
We did not use a criteria for quality.
But I think that's quite essential when you write a review.
The third is a narrative.
Yeah, but you included papers for that review.
Yeah.
It can be narrative, but I mean, you could be narrative on something completely wrong if you don't use the right papers for that review. So how did you ensure that your narrative, speaking about Creighton, was based on solid data rather than on some reviews that made of data that are not really good?
We did not include the review, we did not include the commentaries, we only include preclinical studies.
Yeah, but how do we know that the clinical studies were good?
We can't sure, maybe it's a good point. This is good. I should make another review with better, with other criteria.
Okay.
A very, very short question from Professor Shivano and a very short answer from the candidate, if that's still possible.
Yeah, thank you very much again for your presentation. The last question, in your consideration, final consideration, one-page final consideration, you suggest that the future in psychiatry may be around nutraceuticals, herbal highs, herbs and plants. Can you better expand on that? Do you think that it is really an issue? Because I know you said something like that clients, subjects, patients may be very attracted to herbs and plants because they are coming from Earth, and they can be very scared and against medicinals being prepared, manufactured by pharmaceutical companies. However, even herbal highs, even herbs and plants, they do contain chemicals at the end of the day, because otherwise they don't work. Which is your explanation? Thank you, dear candidate.
Herbal heights, or maybe legal heights, could be a problem. I was not meaning herbicides, also in my proposition before. I was meaning nutraceuticals such as saffron or curcuma. I meant those.
Okay.
No. Herbal hides, I would say dangerous, because people buy them on dark web or buy them on internet online shops, and they can be really risky when they're using. Thank you. So it's better that people with anxiety can use nutraceuticals, but not herbalites. They are really problems for our practice. Thank you.
Elisabeth Prevete, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return to this room.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. All your time, 'cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Take the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Elisabeth Brevete, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Ramakers is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times?
Yes, I promise.
Wait, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent and responsible.
I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Elisabeth Brevete, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Okay, so it's yours. You can maybe give it to. Don't let it drop. Don't let it drop. So, Elisabeth, this is the point in time where we sort of reminisce a little bit on how the procedures went and how you did over the last 5 years, because it has been 5 years. And I was thinking about, now, how did it actually start? And I had to dig deep, really, to get an answer to that. And I think the answer lies in Maastricht, because we had a conference on novel psychoactive substances in the time, where we had a lot of people present that are actually here in this committee as well. Eve and Kim, also Laura was there. And we had Professor Bersani and Ornella Corazza. And she was like organizing even the conference in Maastricht. And I think we had dinner in the castle and we were discussing novel psychoactive substances and interesting compounds that would be interesting to study. And by that time, I think Ornella just came back from Asia and she had, for the first time experienced, I believe, that wonderful plant, kratom. And she was so enthusiastic about it that she wanted us to really study it. But she didn't have any funds or any people or nothing, just this idea that maybe kratom is the next thing to go. So, and we kept on talking about this together. And then all of a sudden, I think it was Professor Bassani said, I know this wonderful student. I'm pretty sure she's willing to come over to Maastricht. And that was you. And this conference was in 2019. And I think only like 3-4 months later, you arrived in our laboratory to actually start working on a kratom protocol. And by that time, you were still a student in medicine. You were doing your specialization in psychiatry. And you had like a couple of months before you were to complete your studies. So I think you stayed with us for about, I don't know, actually 4, 5, 6 months, maybe max. During which time we started writing, well, you wrote the protocol, and we had all the discussions about the dose and how many people and so on and so on. And then I think it was in 2020, like January, February, just before COVID, that you did your final examination in Italy, and you were officially a psychiatrist. And a week before you did your final examination, you already got a job offer in Rome. So there you were. So you were gone, basically. You had a protocol, we had it submitted. You managed all of that, but by that time you were left already to Rome. And that was it. So we had a problem in a way, because we wanted to run the study, but you were no longer there. But luckily we have a very strong Italian connection in Maastricht. And by that time we had another psychiatrist, a visiting psychiatrist, who was also doing a study, Riccardo Paci. And I think he was the first that took over and started actually the collection of the data, until he also finished his studies, and he got a job offer in Bologna, I believe. And then we had Mauro Cavaro, who is in the audience, also from Italy, Sicily, who had no problem with running your study and collecting some data. And third, I think, was Johannes Rijkweg, who has played a major role in organizing and collecting all of the data. So, and all of this started in 2021, I believe. But when you went back to Rome, you actually also started talking about a PhD program. And you said, well, I know I have a job, I know it will be busy as a clinician, but I really, really want to pursue a PhD. And that's when you brought up that maybe we can do a PhD program in Maastricht and also in Italy, in Rome, at Sapienza University. And that's where Professor Massimo Pasquini comes in. Because we did all the negotiation with him, and he really, really was very supportive of the idea. And we thought, well, this can be done very quickly, but that was not really the case. I mean, we had to hand it over to our administrative people in Maastricht and in Rome, and how it is like with administration. So while the data collection started of your study in 2021, the process of getting the Cututela agreement arranged also started, and they both finished at the same time in 2023. So it took 2 years to collect all of the data, and it took 2 years to actually sign the agreement. And by that time, you were actually ready to return to Maastricht, because all the data was collected, and you wanted to spend some more months in Maastricht to analyze the data of that study, but also a survey study that you've done at the same time. So that basically was your second visit, I think, to Maastricht. So what in general is incredible about your PhD is that you managed to keep so many balls in the air, right? Because I mentioned it, you went back to Rome as a psychiatrist. And we were talking about this earlier this week. And you told me that you supervise 400 patients, right? That is your asset, 400 patients. You see 8 patients every day. And you spend 2 to 3 hours on administration related to all of these patients and psychiatrists consult. So that really is not a lot of time for you to actually work on a PhD or finish a PhD at all. So you had to do everything in your free time, in your spare time. I don't know when that was, in the evening or in the weekends. But given that, right, and if you consider that in these 5 years you wrote 2 reviews, you did two ethnographic analysis, you did 2 surveys, and you did an experimental study, and all of that is now bundled in one thesis, and all of these chapters have been published, right? So that's actually an incredible achievement, I would say. And I'm also noticing now that all of these papers are coming out, that you get a lot of attention in the sense that the work is being cited quite often, downloaded quite often. So clearly you're sort of providing information where people are looking for, and there's a need for it. So the clinical relevance of your work, I would say, is very high. So you do a lot of work in combination, and I sometimes wonder, how do you do all of that? And well, you're a psychiatrist. You once told me that maybe you suffer from OCD, and in this case, that might be like a positive thing.
Just straight.
Well, maybe it's a positive thing. I don't know, but it would be well, it's incredible that you do all of these things together. And another aspect of that is that, I mean, I don't know, you have like, you're kind of a superstitious person, I believe. So I don't know whether this helped or contributed to your success, but it might. And I think that the first time when you left us in Maastricht, you actually gave us a small present, which I'm now wearing. You probably notice it. Eva is also wearing it. So it's an amulet that stands for superstition and brings good luck. And it's called the Horn of Napoli. But when I dived into it a little bit deeper, actually was surprised to read that it actually represents a phallus symbol. Did you know that? I didn't know that, but it represents a phallus symbol.
A luck.
And it's a phallus of a god, a Roman god, Priapus. And that's also where this condition comes from, priapism. So it's actually a psychiatric condition. So normally people would find treatment for that, but in Napoli, they take that as, I don't know, a little, it's not a condition in Napoli, I guess, but something to be proud of. Well, I don't know whether it helped you at all. I think it helped you today. You know, we were wearing it to wish you luck. I don't think you needed it because you did very well on your own. I'm very glad, I think I speak on behalf of all of us, that we had the opportunity to collaborate with you, to work with you. I'm also aware that you want to continue the collaboration with us, and we will find ways to do that in the future. I'm sure, even when you're in Italy and we're in Maastricht, I think there will be nice opportunities coming up. And I wish you, of course, you and also your family and your friends, colleagues, a lot of success. And I wish you a brilliant and nice future. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dear Dr. Prevete, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the degree you have acquired. With this, I officially close this session. I would like to tell everyone who wants to congratulate Dr. Prevete to move to the rafter for celebration. We will take some pictures with the online opposition members and then join you shortly. Thank you.